Welcome to this episode of Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. Turkey is in the midst of a political crisis. The country's Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has denied any allegations of corruption and has described this as a conspiracy that eclipses all other coup attempts in Turkey. At the centre of the controversy is Turkey's trade with Iran, which has been under strict economic sanctions imposed by the UN, US and the EU. However, at the heart of the investigation is not the legality of this form of trading, but the alleged corruption and bribery of Turkish government officials involved in the trade. So who's at the heart of this so-called conspiracy? And what does it mean for the future of the Turkish government? In the studio with me to discuss these questions are Hakan Kamuz, chairman of Musiad, a Turkish businessmen's association, Zeynep Köseresoglu, researcher at Centre for Turkish Studies in London. And joining the conversation via Skype, we have Dimitar Betchev, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to you all. But first, let's have a look at this report by Tiana Simons.
The media have called it the biggest political scandal ever to hit the Turkish Republic. Since the allegations of large-scale bribery of officials emerged in mid-December, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan's government have been under the spotlight. Top politicians and business leaders have been accused of taking bribes in their millions to facilitate the trading of gold with Iran. Even Erdogan's own family have been implicated in the scandal. Now an anti-graft probe seeks to establish who played a part. The Turkish Prime Minister has called the allegations a dirty plot by rival Hizmet party leader and US-based exile Fethullah Gulen. Erdogan insists that Gulen's use of the judiciary to investigate the claims is a move towards an anti-government coup.
The judiciary should not go beyond its defined missions and mandate. This is what we are doing in Turkey. Everything else that you hear is misinformation and disinformation. There are people with interests in that process that can also start false remarks or try to make Turkey appear differently.
A purge on the police and judiciary by the government has led to hundreds being reassigned from their jobs. News of the high-profile scandal has once again flared the tempers of the Turkish public, causing protests to erupt on the streets of Istanbul and Ankara.
12 years of corruption in politics has surfaced now. It is very clear that corruption and theft and lies are going on in the government. These people, those thousands, have gathered here to protest this and to call for an end to this.
The media's treatment of the story is another factor in this ongoing soap opera. Uncharacteristically, news outlets previously allied to the government have been hot on the tail of the AKP party members accused. Erdogan maintains that they too are part of the US-backed conspiracy to secure a new government in Ankara. As the political blame game continues, it's clear that there are many factors at play. And with public trust in the run-up to the elections hanging in the balance, Erdogan's future remains under question. Tiana Simons, Islam Channel.
Well, Hakan Kamuz, let me start with you. I mean, Prime Minister says this is all a conspiracy, implying there's nothing to it, it's just politics. I mean, does he have a point?
He has a point. In a way, he's been in government for 11 years. And in any given society where there was corruption allegations, it needs to be properly investigated and properly established whether there are guilty parties or not. The way this was done, they've raided many people's houses and offices and whatnot as if this was some big corruption network. And they've included famous people, star characters in Turkish society, just so that it gets the highlight of the entire media, inside and outside. Only to release everybody and only keep 3 people who are being investigated as we speak. The legal process is in place and it's being done properly. So, but then to turn that into some kind of a propaganda machine saying this government is completely corrupted, all these things are happening, it's just exaggeration. And that's why everybody calls it a dirty plot. to somehow character assassinate the Prime Minister and his government's credibility.
It's a bit suspicious when some of the prosecutors and police people who are supposed to be investigating are then suddenly sacked.
Because the way they did it is completely, you know, if I told you, if you had time to, you allowed me to tell you how they did it, you would be amazed yourself how a public prosecutor would conduct himself in such an illegal manner. You could not be investigating a certain crime that it's your duty to investigate, and you do, and then hold on to the file, do not tell anybody, and then only for all your friends to collect all this kind of stuff together, accumulate them, so that you can then blast it all out and turn it into somehow give an image of it being a massive corruption scandal, when it isn't. So it is illegal conduct by them that they hold on to all this information. They don't arrest people, they don't call them for interviews and whatnot. They just turn this into this very American film style, let's bust into everybody's house and turn this into a show. That's what they did. And that's why what they did was wrong. And they have not been removed from their positions. Their locations have kind of changed around. In Turkey, you can't really sack government officials on this kind of stuff.
Well, Zeynep, I mean, do you agree with any of this? Do you think it's just a conspiracy?
Well, apart from the fact that it's just a conspiracy, we can first look at how, just as Mr. Jamu said, about how these were conducted. Well, there were certain irregularities in the legal procedure, but what is interesting to see is that the government right now is focusing on these illegal irregularities, but when they're going to go on trials, the sledgehammer cases were going on against the military officials and against the Kemalists, as they've been called, then there were a lot of irregularities in the procedures. Many information about what people have been charged on were not revealed to them, and a lot. I'm not saying that the trials were in any way illegitimate, but I'm just saying there were a lot of legal procedural mistakes, and that made the trials also suspicious. And actually, the government itself used them as a blast and as a show as well. So basically, now that it's been being done to the government itself, now it becomes a problem. But let's look at the actual underlying problems in the judiciary, and then we can address the issue. If these are conspiracies, well, there are three different scenarios. Either this is an attack by the Gülen movement against the government. Now that their alliance has been kind of weakening, it's been said that it's an international conspiracy against the government. No matter what, if this is a conspiracy or not, if it's a conspiracy to weaken the economy, then we need to address, well, the economy itself has been has been growing with a misleading and mistaken model, I believe, and that's why this international conspiracy.
Why is the alliance between Gülen and the Prime Minister broken down? I mean, they're both so-called moderate Islamists. They have very similar agendas for Turkey. What went wrong?
Well, there are different, again, scenarios about that, but the alliance between them, they were the alliance was based on being against bringing down the military, the influence of the military over political institutions in Turkey. And once they jointly conducted that, this is one scenario, one option that's being told in the media, slowly with the government attacking, for example, trying to close down the private education institutions that were told to be the strongholds of the Gülen movement. So certain moves were done by each side when also the Gülen movement attacked the head of the intelligence. Well, it is being said that the Gülen movement attacked the head of the Turkish intelligence unit, Hakan Fidan, who was the biggest ally of course, Prime Minister Erdogan. So there were different allegations that both sides the alliance started to shift because of each side's actions.
Let me bring in Dimitar Beshev. I mean, you're a little bit more detached from this, not being from Turkey and being based now in Sofia. What does it look like to you? Do you think there is a serious issue of corruption here?
I mean, if you take the broader look, then you find some generic problems in democratizing societies. Turkey has become more democratic over these decades, and so that AKP has been in power. But what's really lacking is the system of checks and balances, in the sense that Erdogan and the executive more broadly has concentrated incredible amount of power in his hands. It's about one individual. And then you have a coalescing coalition of actors coming together. It's not only the seculars, but also the Gülen movement, who have been deeply suspicious of AKP ever since the government destroyed the army as a power broker. They have a very different outlook on politics. They like spreading their ideology through society rather than top-down through authority. And now you have this clash between Erdogan trying to subdue the judiciary with all caveats about how judiciary operated in Turkey, and on the one side, and then you have the Gulen movement. I think Erdogan has a point, because at the end of the day, he might be authoritarian-minded, but he has a popular mandate. He's been elected. And what he told the Gülenists is, if you want to compete, to challenge me, you have to fight through the voting system. You have to go out and register a party. Whereas where the Gülen movement has a point is precisely that democracy is not just about the popular vote. There has to be some balance of power. There has to be accountability and a measure of free media and independent judiciary. So you have this clash developing, and I think it's there to stay. What's really interesting is the realignment. We used to think that Turkey is divided into secularists on the one side and Kemalists on the other. But now you see both on both sides, in the sense that some segments of the opposition People's Republican Party have been talking to the Gülenists, and indeed the contest for the Istanbul mayorship depends on how the Gülenist vote will turn out. And equally, Erdogan has reached out to some of the officers tried under the Ergenekon trial and suggested they might be retried, saying that you've been victimized by the Gülenists, now we have to work together. And this is a real interesting reshuffle in Turkish politics.
Well, let me bring you in on that.
I was going to add to what the both guests have said. Prime Minister is right now fighting with what you could describe as bureaucratic tutelage. These people have somehow placed themselves from the grassroots, come into the powers where they are now, i.e. sitting in public prosecutors' offices. Some of those people who've been tried under those cases that my friend mentioned are now saying, well, we were duped into this, and evidences that was produced was fake, and we need to be retried, which is Prime Minister and Minister of Justice right now working on that idea of retrying these people so that justice is served. All these allegations of him being corrupt, all these allegations of somehow his son being involved in it is false. And even your piece at the beginning talking about some of the factual information there is not necessarily correct. His son has never been involved in this arrests and detentions and whatnot, but they wanted to make it look like as if it was him, his family is involved, his government is involved. It's not. That's one point. The other point about the realignments that Beşer is saying, it's correct now, Gülen movement. You see, Gülen movement was perceived to be Islamically influenced organization in the world, where they were trying to teach people about Turkey and Turkish language and whatnot, but not Islam or Islamic values. This is not something they've actually been doing it up front.
So they were more nationalist organisations.
No, they were more like their agenda has always been dialogue. Dialogue. That's what they were all, propagating. What now, obviously, is come to prominence is that they are a politically active entity. Hence the reason why Beşer is saying prime ministers challenged them, saying, look, if you want to be a politically active and use all these people that come through the government body and now using their authority in position to undermine this government, that's a political act in itself. Therefore, I challenge you to do this, turn into a political party if you want to, and come into elections. Because this government is an elected government, whether we like it or not. It's an elected government. It has a mandate from people. And again, referring to your initial piece at the beginning of the program, the future of this government is secure. And even right now, the polls are showing 45% for the local elections and over 51%, which is what they had in the last election. Now, I'm not here trying to be their mouthpiece, but this is the factual information about this government. People have rejected this allegation about this government being corrupted.
Well, Zeynep, I mean, where do you stand? I mean, a few months ago we were all talking about the big protests in Istanbul over the building of a park and everything else, and it looked as though Erdogan was really shaky. He survived that. Do you think he's going to survive this crisis?
Well, we will see how he deals with this crisis, because also with the Gezi protests that we saw in the beginning of in May 2013, it was also the way he dealt with the crisis that also weakened his position. Not just the fact that there were protests, but how he dealt with those protests. Again, in this crisis, when you see, for example, as an ordinary citizen, I see no authority in Mr. Camus when he says Erdogan, the allegations against Erdogan or his son or anyone are false, because this is he's not a judicial body. He's not a source of authority. And so basically, I'm supposed to trust the judicial authority the judiciary in my country. But when you see the judicial system having flaws in it, and also when you see the government removing hundreds of policemen and changing the prosecutor of the case twice, then it is difficult for me to even trust the results of that case now, as an ordinary citizen. When, for example, Zakaria was the initial prosecutor of these corruption allegations, of the corruption probe, when he was the prosecutor for the Ergenekon case, no allegations about him being corrupt or was brought about. He was not removed from his post, but when his trial or when his case is this time about the government, then he's being removed. When Prime Minister Erdogan's son decides to finally give his statement to the police, which has been called for weeks ago, after all these prosecutors have been removed and after the police have been removed, well, it is difficult to then say, for an ordinary citizen to just immediately believe Mr. Camus when he says these allegations are false. And also about also what the other guests have said as well, when you look at, even if it's the Gulen movement that is doing this within the state institutions, even if it's the government, then we need to look at, no matter what it is, if it's the ruling party, they neither should have ideological or political influence over state institutions. That is the fundamental problem, I think.
Okay, well, we're coming towards the end of the program, this segment of the program. Let me ask you, Dimitar, I mean, on this point, do you think Erdogan is secure now? Will his party survive, or is he now sort of heavily undermined?
He is under pressure, and it's not just the corruption scandal. Today and yesterday, something really significant happened in the sense that the central bank hiked up the rates, which is really important because this government has tried to keep rates low, even if they put pressure on the lira. Because if there is economic shock to the economy, to Turkish welfare, this will cost him votes. The only time the AKP lost votes was back in 2009, in the depth of the global economic crisis. I think the median voter in Turkey votes through the checkbook, through his or her wallets. And if we have the corruption scandal coupled with a collapse of the Turkish lira, something reminiscent of 2000 and 2002, then we have a scenario where actually there's a serious challenge to the AKP, a perfect storm, if you will. In case they manage to rein in...
We'll have to, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have to come to the end of the segment. Thank you very much for taking part. I know you won't be able to be with us for the second segment, when we will be continuing the discussion, but also focusing on Turkey's relations with Iran, which is to some extent connected with the corruption scandal. Stay with us. Thank you.